Tonight, friends, 6 couples set out to explore a ship the size of a city, every bar, the casino, the spa. And by morning, they've learned the funniest thing. You can sail past 40 restaurants and still want one little table. Last we left our friends, the Via Oceanus had just pulled away from Miami, and a maitre d' named Antonio had done a curious thing. He'd seated 6 couples who'd never met at one round window table. Table 7. 6 strangers from 6 corners of America, laughing by the end of that first dinner like they'd known each other 40 years. Tonight is their first full night aboard, and the whole ship is waiting. There is a particular feeling, friends, on the first evening of a long voyage. The land gone, the whole impossible ship stretching around you like a city somebody built on a dare. 18 decks, 40-some places to eat, a casino, a spa, and somewhere up top, they said, a bar where a robot made the drinks. And at table 7, 6 couples had reached that dangerous stage of the evening, full, happy, and looking for something to do.
Antonio! Antonio, my friend, come here. This veal. Who talked your kitchen this veal? I need to shake his hand. Connie, I'm gonna shake his hand.
Sal, you've shaken every hand on this ship. The man drove us from the gangway, you shook his hand.
Antonio, the maitre d', tall, elegant, silver at his temples, calm as a man who seated nervous strangers for 30 years, only smiled and refilled the water.
I will pass your compliments to the chef, Mr. De Luca. Though I confess, in 30 years, I have never had a table laugh quite like this one on the very first night.
Well, that's 'cause you put the right 12 people at it, partner. I felt it the second I sat down. Lightning. Loretta felt it too.
What I felt, Buck, was you order 3 appetizers because you couldn't choose, and then eat all of mine.
It was just then that a man in a midnight blue blazer with a little ship's crest swept up to the table like he'd been launched from a cannon of pure enthusiasm.
Table 7, my favorite table on the ship, and I haven't even met you. Marco Bellini, cruise director. I have one job, to make sure you never run out of fun aboard the Via Oceanus.
That seems statistically ambitious. We're retired, we have a great deal of time and a finite supply of fun.
Then you haven't seen this ship. 40 restaurants and bars, a casino, a spa, a theater, a different evening every night for a month, and never repeat.
And there, right there, a terrible and wonderful idea was born. You could see it travel around the table like a spark down a fuse.
A different place every night. Marco, partner, why wait? Why don't we see the whole dang ship tonight? All of it, every bar, every deck, a grand tour.
Buck, it is 9 o'clock. The ship is the size of 3 city blocks stacked sideways.
Earl, we got nothing but time and good company. When's the last time 12 grown adults went exploring? I say we go.
Lord help me, I'm already standing up. Earl, get your jacket. When Buck Calhoun gets a notion, it's faster to follow than to argue.
And so it was settled, the way most expeditions in this company would be settled. Loudly, suddenly, and with Loretta quietly counting heads so nobody got left behind. Now, before a grand tour can begin, a grand tour must escape the dinner table. And that, in this company, was never going to be simple. Because while Buck was rallying the troops, Walter Whitfield had quietly become fascinated by the dessert cart. You have to understand about Walter, a retired physics professor, 87 patents, and the dangerous curiosity of a man who's never seen a system he didn't want to improve. And the dessert cart to Walter was a system.
Alina, observe, the waiter brings the cart, serves, returns it 6 trips, whereas if the cart simply parked here and we pass the plates along 1 trip, a 40% efficiency gain.
Walter, darling, it is dessert. It is not the Apollo program.
Everything is the Apollo program if you do it correctly.
Alina Whitfield, serene, 53 years married to a genius, simply folded her hands. Because there are two ways to deal with Walter optimizing something. Stop him, which never works, or wait for the universe to teach him a lesson, which always does. Meanwhile, at the far end of the table, a quieter operation was underway. Sal DeLuca was wrapping dinner rolls in a napkin and tucking them, with the smooth confidence of a professional, into his jacket.
Sal, Salatore. We are on a ship with 24-hour food. There is a buffet that never closes. Why are you stealing bread?
It's not stealing, Connie. It's provisioning. A man gets hungry at 2 in the morning. Where's he going to be? Up a creek. Me? I'll have a roll.
50 years. 50 years he's been provisioning. We have never once been up a creek.
Could happen.
That was Gus Lindquist, the Minnesota dairy farmer, a man who treated words like he was paying for each one by the letter, and could happen was, by his standards, a generous contribution. Sal pointed at him, vindicated.
See? Gus gets it. Gus is a serious man.
And then, as if the universe had been listening to Walter the whole time, the dessert cart, parked beside the professor, began very slowly to roll. The ship had leaned just gently, the way ships do, and 18 Turamisses started a quiet, unanimous journey toward the floor.
Incoming, Gus grabbed the yep nice.
Gus Lindquist, without rising, without hurrying, without changing his expression in any measurable way, put out one large, flat hand and stopped the cart cold. 18 desserts trembled and held. The table burst into applause.
I may not have accounted for the rolling.
No, dear, you did not account for the ocean.
The first stop was, of course, food. In a company with Sal DeLuca and Dorothy Lindquist, all roads led to food. Up they went, 12 strong, to the glass-roofed top-deck buffet, a gleaming, around-the-clock cathedral of every dish you could imagine, open 23 hours a day.
Oh, would you just look? There's a whole table of just pie, Gus. A whole table. I have died and the Lord has a buffet.
Well, found heaven, day one.
Dorothy Lindquist, round, rosy, 35 years a country nurse and a lifetime of feeding 200 at church suppers, moved through that buffet like a general inspecting troops. She was not eating. She was assessing.
Dorothy, honey, you have got that look. Earl, she's got the look I get before I organize a choir.
I'm just saying, Ruby Mae, the soft serve machine is making a sound. You hear that? That little grinding sound? That machine is unhappy.
And she was right. At the ice cream station, a young crew member wrestled with a soft serve machine that had decided, on night one of a 12-month voyage, to produce nothing but a sad, sputtering dribble. A small crowd of disappointed children gathered. It was, in its small way, a crisis. Now nobody asked Gus to help. Nobody ever asks Gus. He appears beside broken things the way weather appears, and he'd already crouched down to look at the back of the machine.
Pumps froze, seals dry.
Sir, you really shouldn't. Are you an engineer?
Dairy farmer. Same thing. Got a butter knife?
And picture it, friends. A 75-year-old man in a feed store cap, on the first night of a luxury cruise, fixing a soft-serve machine with a butter knife and a packet of oil from the omelet station, while children watched in silence, and his wife handed out pie to keep morale up. 2 minutes later, the machine gave a healthy sigh and produced a perfect, towering swirl of vanilla. The children cheered, and Sal DeLuca, watching, leaned over to Dorothy with the gleam of a man who has just had a thought about food.
Dorothy, you and me. Before this trip is over, We outcooked this entire ship. I've got a feeling about you. You're a serious cook.
Oh, Sal, I once fed a blizzard, 200 snowed-in folks, 3 cans of cream of mushroom, and Faith, you don't scare me.
Sal, you found your soulmate, and it's a Minnesota grandmother. I'm not even mad. I'm impressed.
And by the time they left, the crew had started pointing at Gus whenever something broke, a habit that lasted the whole voyage, and one Gus never complained about, because a man who fixes things is only content when there are things to fix. Up then to the top of the ship, to a glass-walled cocktail lounge called the Crow's Nest, the black Atlantic below the windows. Behind the gleaming bar stood a tall man with a neat beard and a bow tie, polishing a glass with the calm of someone who's judged 1,000 drinkers and liked most of them.
Good evening, Reggie Okafor, head bartender. 12 of you, 1 table, a great deal of laughter coming up the stairs. Let me guess, you'd like something that isn't on the menu.
Now that is a man who knows his customers. Reggie, partner, hit me with the biggest, boldest thing you got. Something Texas-sized.
Sir, with respect, Texas-sized is how I lose glassware. Let me make you something better than big.
And he did. Reggie built 12 drinks bourbon for Buck, something pink and ridiculous for Loretta before she could ask, a ginger ale for Earl, who didn't drink and never apologized for it. Then he set a tall, jewel-bright cocktail in the middle of the table.
And this one's on me. I'm calling it the Table 7. 12 ingredients, none of them belong together. Somehow it works.
Mr. Okafor, that is the most elegant thing anyone has ever said about us.
They toasted to that, and soon the talk turned to stories, and Buck Calhoun, who'd been holding one in for 10 minutes, set down his glass.
Y'all want to hear about the biggest catfish ever pulled out of the Canadian River? 'Cause I'm the man who pulled it.
Here we go. Reggie, you'll want to sit down for this. It's a long one, and the fish grows.
Now, 1961. I'm out on the Canadian River with a hand line and a chicken liver, and I feel a tug. Not a bite, a tug. Like the river decided to pull back. That catfish towed me 40 feet upstream, standing up, like water skiing except sadder and slower.
I've been told by stuff that tracks keep going.
3 hours we fought, me and that fish. By the end, my boots were full of river, and I drag him up on the bank. And he is so big, friends, a passing rancher offered to buy him as a guest cottage.
A guest cottage.
He had room, Connie. I'm not saying I let the fish go. I'm saying we came to an understanding.
The catfish, for the record, was 11 inches. I have the photograph. I keep it in my purse for exactly this moment.
And she did a faded photograph of Buck, 50 years younger, beaming, holding a fish about the size of a hot dog. The table came apart, and Buck laughed hardest of all because a man who loves a story doesn't mind being the punchline.
Sir, in 11 years behind this bar, that is the finest fish I have ever heard. The 11-inch ones never are.
Now tucked in one bright corner was the strangest sight on the whole ship, a bar with no bartender at all. Just 2 gleaming robotic arms behind the glass, whirring and pivoting, mixing cocktails to order from a tablet screen. The children loved it. Walter Whitfield loved it more than any child alive.
Aliner, do you see this? Articulated arms, programmed pour, fixed measures. It's beautiful. It's also, and I say this with great respect, pouring far too slowly.
Walter, we discussed this. We discussed it about the dessert cart not 40 minutes ago.
That was a cart. This is robotics, entirely different field.
Reggie wandered over, dried a glass, and watched the professor study the robot the way a chess master studies a board. He had, it seemed, dealt with curious passengers before. He had never quite dealt with Walter.
I should mention, sir, that the manufacturer locked the timing. Safety feature. Nobody's been able to speed it up.
Nobody.
I've said the wrong word, haven't I?
He had, because there is no sentence more dangerous to say to Walter Whitfield than nobody's been able to. Within 90 seconds, he'd charmed a technician into showing him the settings, and within 3 minutes the robot arms moved in a smoother, faster rhythm, and poured, Reggie had to admit, a better martini.
Okay, I gotta try it now. Daisy, you want one. I'm gonna order the most complicated thing on there and see if the robot panics.
Order it. But be gentle with him, Chuck. He's working very hard, and nobody ever thanks the robot.
Daisy Holloway, long graying hair, a flower tucked in it, bracelets you could hear from across a room, said this completely seriously. And then she leaned toward the robot bar, put her hand near the glass, closed her eyes, and announced her reading.
He has good energy. A little anxious, but good.
Daisy, honey. It's a forklift that makes drinks.
Everything has energy, Connie. Even forklifts. Especially forklifts.
And do you know, at exactly that moment the robot produced Chuck's impossibly complicated cocktail flawlessly, with a little mechanical flourish nobody had programmed. Walter swore it was the new timing. Daisy swore it was gratitude. And Reggie poured himself a quiet drink and decided some passengers were going to be more interesting than others. Down then by a glittering glass staircase to the beating heart of the ship after dark, Casino Royale. Slot machines chiming like electric birds, green felt tables, the soft riffle of cards, and presiding over it all in a sequined gown and cat-eye glasses on a jeweled chain, a woman who watched the whole room at once.
Well, 12 new faces and not a one of them nervous. I like that, Vera Kowalski. Around here they call me Vegas Vera, and the house Honey always notices.
Oh, I like her, Buck. I like her a great deal. Vera, sugar, where do they keep the roulette? I have a system.
Everybody has a system, darling. That's how I afford the gown.
Now you'd think the gambler here would be Buck, loud, bold Buck, who never met a bet he didn't shake hands with. But the real card shark at table 7 was the former rodeo queen who'd spent 40 years keeping a Texas ranch solvent while her husband created. Loretta Calhoun could count cards in her sleep and bluff a federal judge.
Tell you what, Vera, I'm feeling lucky tonight. I'll put my hat on it. My lucky Stetson right here on the table. Black versus the hat. One spin.
Buckminster Calhoun, you will not bet that hat.
Loretta, a man's gotta...
You have lost that hat overboard twice. A goat ate the brim of one in Mexico. You are not handing it to a roulette wheel on night 1.
And here something lovely happened. At the edge of the casino, a well-fed man in a navy gold-buttoned blazer had been watching the company with the curled lip of someone who finds joy vulgar. This was Prescott Van Horn III, who'd been on more cruises than he could count and enjoyed none of them.
How quaint. The hat people have found the casino. Muriel, do remind me to request a quieter table for the remainder of the voyage.
Yes, Prescott, I'll add it to the list, dear. Right under Learn to Relax, which has been on there since 1987.
Loretta heard him. Of course she heard him. But instead of firing back, and she could have ended that man with a sentence, she simply turned to the roulette table, set down a modest stack of chips, and smiled the dangerous, gracious smile of a Southern woman who's decided to win in front of a rude man on purpose.
Black, please, Vera. And Buck, honey, put your hat back on your head where it belongs. We don't bet the hat. We bet the rent money, like civilized people.
Oh, I am going to enjoy this table.
What followed was, by first-night standards, a legend in the making. Loretta Calhoun's number came up, and then it came up again, and a small, delighted crowd gathered around the roulette table, the way crowds gather around anyone winning gracefully and having the time of her life.
Black again, honey, that's 3. I've worked this floor 11 years and I have learned to respect a streak. Are you sure you've never done this professionally?
Vera, sugar. I ran a cattle ranch through 2 oil busts with a husband who thought a budget was a kind of bird. This is relaxing.
But the quiet marvel of the evening was at the next table, where Earl Washington sat at blackjack with a ginger ale and the unbothered serenity of a man who'd spent 40 years as a country doctor and could not be rattled by a deck of cards. Earl did not whoop. Earl did not slap the table. Earl simply played patient, exact, betting small and steady, and slowly his modest stack of chips grew into a less modest one. He played the way he did everything, like a man who knew the trick to most things is to stay calm longer than the situation does.
Earl, buddy, you've been quietly cleaning up over here for 20 minutes and your face hasn't moved once. That's the most terrifying thing I've ever seen, and I've been on fire.
40 years setting broken bones at 3 in the morning, Chuck. A man learns not to flinch.
And over at the edge, Prescott Van Horn III was not having Earl's evening. He'd sat at the high-stakes table with great ceremony, lost with great speed, and was signaling for another drink with the irritation of a man rich enough to lose and proud enough to mind. Now here is where you learn something about this company. A lesser group would have laughed at the rude man's bad luck. Instead, when Prescott lost his last hand and sat there stiff and sour, it was Earl who quietly slid a chair back with his foot and spoke, not unkindly, across the felt.
Cards are cruel, friend. Come sit by us a minute. We're losing much more cheerfully over here.
I hardly think. I do not sit by. I have a table.
Prescott, the man offered you a chair. In 40 years of marriage, I have rarely heard a kinder sentence. Sit down.
And Prescott did not sit down, not that night. He drew himself up, muttered something about the noise, and swept off to his quiet table for one, but he glanced back, just once. And the charming of a skeptic is a slow business. It always begins with a single backward look. There comes a moment in every good night, friends, when the noise and the laughter become just a little too much. And so, by some silent agreement, the company drifted out of the bright casino onto the open promenade deck, out into the enormous, breathing dark. And the dark out there was something. No land, no glow on the horizon. Just the black Atlantic rolling past, and above it a sky so thick with stars it looked less like a sky and more like something spilled.
Oh, would you look at that? You can't see this from a city. You forget there's this many. We forget all the time.
You know, this reminds me of my grandfather. Old country, no electric where he grew up. He used to say the stars were holes in the floor of heaven, and the light was the good cooking coming through.
Oh, Sal. That's the nicest thing your grandfather ever said. Usually you quote him about the rent.
And they stood there a while, 12 old friends of one evening, leaning on the rail in the warm wind. Earl and Ruby me close together. Gus and Dorothy, comfortable in the silence they'd earned 50 years ago. Walter pointing out constellations and getting two wrong, which Alina did not correct, because some optimizations aren't worth the trouble. And then it happened. Far out over the black water, the ship's wake lit up, a long, glowing, ghostly trail of pale blue-green light, alive in the churning sea. Bioluminescence, Walter would later explain, tiny living things woken to light by the ship.
The sea is glowing, Chuck. The whole sea is glowing.
Yes, it is, honey. That's okay. That's a new one, and I've seen a few.
And just then, 11 other people swear to this. A single shooting star fell, slow and bright, straight down the glowing wake, as if the sky and the sea had agreed to put on a show for one table of strangers who decided to go exploring.
That's a sign. I don't care what anybody says. 12 strangers, one table, the sea lights up, and the sky throws a star. That is the universe telling us something.
And what's it telling us, baby?
That we're exactly where we're supposed to be.
And nobody argued, not even Connie, not even Walter, who could have explained the precise physics of every single light in that sky, and chose instead, for once, to just stand quietly with his wife and watch. The grand tour, it had been agreed somewhere around midnight, would resume in the morning, because there was one corner of the ship the men of Table 7 had been actively avoiding, and the women of Table 7 were not going to allow it. The spa. And so, the next morning, 6 retired husbands were herded, protesting, shuffling, suspicious into the thermal suite. A hushed, warm place of heated loungers, a steam room, a sauna, and a serene woman in seafoam linen, calm as someone who's watched many reluctant men discover they enjoy relaxing.
Welcome, I am Anik. Breathe. The hardest part of the spa, gentlemen, is always agreeing to come in, and you've done the hard part already.
I feel ridiculous, Loretta. I am a grown man in a bathrobe and little slippers. I look like a very large baby.
You look wonderful, honey. You look relaxed. It's terrifying. Sit down.
And one by one, the men gave in. Earl took to the warm stone loungers like he'd waited his whole life for permission to lie down. Sal lasted 90 seconds before befriending everyone in the steam room. Gus said whelp and fell asleep so completely that Dorothy checked on him twice. And Chuck Holloway wandered straight into the sauna, cranked it to its highest setting, and lay there in the searing heat with the blissful smile of a man whose knees had waited decades for this exact temperature.
Oh, this is the good stuff. Daisy, my knees are quiet. I haven't heard him this quiet since the 80s.
That's because you finally listened to them, sweetheart. Annika, he never listens to his knees. They predict weather, you know, better than the ship.
Many things speak to us if we are warm enough to hear them. Mr. Whitfield, please step away from the sauna controls.
Because, of course, Walter Whitfield, 4 minutes into the most relaxing room on the ship, had found a control panel. And a control panel, to Walter, is not a thing to be relaxed near. It is an invitation.
Anik, I'm only observing that the heat is uneven. The far corner runs 4 degrees cooler, if one simply adjusted the vent baffle.
Mr. Whitfield, in this room we do not optimize. In this room we surrender, breathe in, and please put down the baffle.
Listen to the nice woman, Walter. 53 years I've been trying to get you to surrender to something. Let the Dutch lady succeed where I have failed.
And wonder of wonders, he did. Walter set down the vent baffle, lay back on the warm stone, closed his eyes, and for 11 entire minutes optimized absolutely nothing. Alina timed it. She said it was a personal record, and she may have been right. After the spa, the company discovered the last great secret of the Via Oceanus, the sanctuary, an adults-only solarium at the top of the ship, a hushed sundeck of canvas cabanas, and a small still pool, where the only rule, posted in gentle lettering, was quiet. It was, Anik had told them, the most peaceful place aboard, and for about 4 minutes it was.
Now this is what I needed. Earl, lie back, close your eyes, listen to that. Nothing. Pure, blessed nothing.
Ruby May, I have known you 52 years. You cannot abide nothing for more than a quarter of an hour. You will organize this entire deck before lunch.
I will do no such thing. Though I will say, that young couple by the pool has lovely voices. You can just tell.
And here the peace of the sanctuary met its match. Into that hushed, perfect quiet swept Prescott Van Horn III, expecting, as everywhere, to be the most important person present, and finding instead a deck full of the very people he'd been avoiding.
Oh, marvelous. The Hat People. Is there a single square foot of this vessel you have not colonized? This is the quiet deck. It is for refined relaxation, not for whatever it is you do.
Now the old Ruby Me, 38 years running a classroom, could have frozen that man where he stood with one look. Instead, she did something far more dangerous. She smiled at him, warmly, as if he were a difficult child she'd already decided to love.
You're absolutely right, sir. It is the quiet deck. Come sit and be quiet with us. There's a lovely cabana right here, and you look like a man who hasn't had a proper rest in years.
I did not come here to be sat with.
He never does, dear, and yet somehow it keeps happening to him. Thank you, we'll take the cabana.
And to the astonishment of his own wife, Prescott sat down, stiffly, at the very edge of the cabana as far from the Hat People as it allowed. But he sat, and he did not leave. And when, a little later, the young couple began to hum by the pool, and Ruby Me, never able to help herself, began very quietly to harmonize, something almost unbelievable happened. Prescott Van Horn III, world-weary and sour, did not tell her to stop. He closed his eyes. And Muriel, watching her husband's shoulders come down from around his ears for the first time in decades, had to turn away to the rail so nobody would see her face.
Told you. Quarter of an hour. She's got a choir going and a convert started, and we have not yet had lunch.
Hush, Earl. I'm harmonizing.
The grand tour had one stop left, because that evening, in a lounge full of mismatched teams and competitive retirees, Marco Bellini hosted the event that is, on every cruise ship in every ocean, secretly a blood sport, Trivia Night.
Welcome, welcome. Tonight's grand prize, eternal glory, and a bottle of the ship's finest. Table 7, I see you formed a team. What shall I call you?
The Magnificent Seven, Marco. On account of there's 12 of us. Don't overthink it.
There's no sevens in that book. Just the table number and bad math.
And what a team they were. 12 people who'd lived 12 long, wide, different lives turned out to be an absolute terror at trivia. Geography, history, science, music, cooking, scripture, somebody at that table had lived every answer. Earl got the medical question before Marco had the second syllable out. When a question came up about church hymns, Ruby Me didn't even look at the answer sheet. She just turned to Marco with a patient, kindly expression that said, "Next question, please."
Question 11, and this one's a stumper. What is the only mammal capable of true sustained flight?
Bat.
The gentleman in the cap instantly, without looking up from his coffee, Correct.
He knows every animal there is, Marco. He's a farmer. Ask him a hard one.
But the moment of the night came on the final question. Marco, with a showman's grin, asked the precise horsepower of a vintage luxury automobile. The table went quiet, and then, from a quiet table for two at the edge of the room, came a stiff, reluctant, unmistakable voice.
345. It's 345. I owned one in my youth, before I became this.
The whole lounge turned, and Buck Calhoun, bless him, did not gloat. He did not crow. He simply pulled an empty chair out from the magnificent sevens table, pointed at it, and said the most generous thing one competitor can say to another.
Well, get over here, partner. A man who knows his horsepower belongs on this team. We're one short. We've always been one short.
And Prescott looked at that empty chair for a long, long moment. And then, not that night, friends. He was not ready. He gave a stiff little nod, and something crossed his face that might, in a certain light, have been the ghost of a smile. The full thawing of that proud old heart would take this whole voyage. But it started here with an empty chair and a question about a car. And so, friends, the grand tour ended the only place it could have. Not the casino, not the glowing wake or the glass lounge up top, but back in the main dining room, at a round table by the window, where Antonio was setting 12 places for the second night running, with a small private smile.
Welcome back, Table 7. I trust you found the ship to your liking, all 40 restaurants of it.
Antonio, my friend. We saw the whole thing. The casino, the robot, the spa. I wore a robe, Antonio. Ask anybody. And you know what we figured out?
Tell me, Mr. DeLuca.
Best seat on the whole ship is the one you gave us. Right here. This one.
And it was true. They had a whole city to roam, 18 decks, 40 kitchens. And what they wanted at the end of it all was each other, a round table and the dark Atlantic in the window.
I keep thinking about that star last night. Down the glowing water. You all saw it. I'm not making it up.
We saw it, honey. Nobody's saying you made it up. Even Walter's not saying it. And Walter says everything.
I was going to explain the precise physics of that. No, it was a beautiful star. Alina's right. Some nights you just let the star be a star.
53 years, and the man finally learns. I'd have brought champagne if I'd known.
And they laughed, the way they would laugh 1,000 more times in the long months ahead. Through equator ceremonies and desert winds, Sydney harbors and Roman fountains, and quiet stories that would crack a few hearts open and warm a great many more. Because this was the secret the grand tour had taught them on the first full night of the longest voyage of their lives. A ship can be as big as a city, the world as wide as an ocean, but home, real home, is just the people who save you a seat, and theirs was right here, table 7, best seat on the ship.
Same time tomorrow, everybody?
Buck, honey, where else would we be?
Next time aboard the Via Oceanus, the ship settles into her first day at sea, and Buck Calhoun finally tells the one. The story of a car, a 1958 Cadillac, the color of desert gold, the car that won him Loretta. He's waited his whole life to tell it, and Loretta just as long to correct it. Don't miss it. Thanks so much for sailing with us. If our retirees made you smile, give this a like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who'd save you a seat. And tell us in the comments which couple at Table 7 is your favorite already. See you in the next port. You've been at Table 7 aboard the Via Oceanus, where a ship the size of a city taught 12 friends that home is just the people who save you a seat. Fair winds. We'll see you at sea. Thank you for sailing these miles of our cruise, along with our characters. See you in the next port. To be continued.